In Module 1, we looked at the framing of SDG 4.7 and what we mean by education for sustainable development, who should be involved in implementing ESD into our learning spaces, and how we can make it happen from wherever we're starting from. In this second module, we look at how educators can apply ESD and SDG 4.7 into their lesson planning, pedagogy, and overall frame of mind from which we operate as educators.
We'll talk about what is the purpose of education. What are some of the frames of mind that educators can start from when thinking about how to begin integrating ESD into their teaching practice? How do principles of social-emotional learning support effective ESD teaching and learning? How are the curricular alignments to the state and national standards made? And what are some useful approaches, structures, and key considerations that you can use in your lesson planning? We'll also talk about common challenges that teachers may face when beginning to integrate ESD and how we can overcome them.
First of all, we're not talking about adding on. We're talking about sustaining human and other life on the planet and the role of education in doing so. We are talking about reorienting the curriculum.
When we work with educators, we want to see what are you teaching and how can we find opportunities for you to weave sustainability into what you're already doing.
Every single child growing up right now is going to be dealing with the effects of climate change. It is really important that we emphasize this and include it into whatever we're teaching them.
We have standards and performance indicators and ways of thinking that can get baked right into the core curriculum. And systems thinking, for example, is an attribute. It's a way of thinking. It's a set of tools that have to be baked into the curriculum so that children and young people and teachers and community members can see the connections, can connect the dots between what we're talking about and their lives.
We called it learning as connection. It actually strengthens acquisition of more formal types of knowledge because it makes more sense to children and the meaning-making process gets catalyzed.
One theme we heard from our experts and stakeholders was the importance of infusing the social and emotional aspects of educating for a sustainable future. Climate change can be scary for kids, and thinking about integrating ESD can be daunting for teachers. How can educators consider these social and emotional aspects of teaching about ESD and plan to infuse social and emotional learning into their teaching process?
Our students they're not just repository for facts. You need to address the social, you need to address the emotional factors that underlie each student's experience.
What we've learned here is, I think, to be more humble. You can also become more open to your own blind spots and your own, things that are absent and not present in your own life experience and your own way of thinking.
The hard story is that not every community is going to be affected equally. Yes, every community is going to be affected, but we do know that some people are experiencing what is the worst possible thing that we could think about right now. And so I do think whatever we can do to build people's empathy level, the better.
The reason why empathy is a great catalyst for learning is because it comes from the space of self-awareness and the understanding of impact of my actions on you or on you. So it's a fantastic way to reference and frame the issue rather than jump to solutions. Most often than not, if you're not moving from empathy, you're working from assumptions. You kind of design a solution for somebody rather than with somebody, right? And that's really where the disconnect comes. And then what happens is you continue to do that. Children grow up saying, see, nothing changes. This is the way it's always been. But the moment you start with empathy and tell children to understand the people who are affected, then you're more likely to design a solution for their experience.
Beyond thinking about the social and emotional learning of students, teachers themselves must not forget about the importance of caring for our own well-being as a key foundation for effective teaching.
If we're not taking care of ourselves, there's no saving the planet. So the social and emotional learning is directly related to both sustainability of the self and sustainability of our communities.
If I have a sense of alignment with myself, I'm more likely to want to reflect that well-being on another. But if I am distressed within, I am less likely to use creativity in my solution making. That's why a sense of well-being within can make you be a change maker outside.
We see eco-anxiety on the rise, as children are, and youth are being alerted to this, they're, and how serious it is, and the kids get really depressed and anxious, and either, it's hard to dwell in that, so either do you turn away, or how do you cope with that? So we know that education needs to go beyond just teaching anyone the facts, that it's got to deal with those social emotional aspects to help overcome their various forms of denial and or anxiety around that. And one of the key ways to do that is to link in with the education ways of taking action now, so that people feel like, okay, this is linked into the things that matter to me, and I can see how we can make changes, have an outlet for that. So it becomes more hopeful, more positive, more feasible, and people can kind of transition.
Now that we've talked about some of the key considerations for getting in the right frame of mind for infusing ESD into our learning spaces, we'll hear from our experts on how educators can start thinking about integrating ESD into and across subject areas for transdisciplinary learning in ways that promote solutions-oriented thinking and connect with local histories and community needs.
In every course, there are going to be connections to climate education.
The climate crisis, and climate change needs to be integrated in all subjects. We don't see that in curriculum for social studies, civics, ELA. We have a few points of it in next generation science standards, but I would really love to see that integrated across all grade levels and across all subject areas. New York City adopted the next generation science standards, tweaked a few of them, and made the New York State science standards. The scope and sequence is the roadmap for what a science teacher should be teaching. What we did is we went through that roadmap with our climate ed leadership team, and we highlighted some of the opportunities for direct climate connection, direct sustainability connection, direct United Nations SDG connection. We are actually working on doing that with many scope and sequences in New York City: civics for all, math standards, which come from the state, ELA, diverse learners, even art and dance, and really trying to take the busy work out of it, so teachers can go, okay, every time I see that earth symbol, I know that there's a clear connection to sustainability, climate, environmental justice, environmental work.
Our primary goal right now as a group, we have teachers from all over the state working with the New Jersey Department of Education and the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, in taking the existing lessons that are out there and not creating new lessons, but what we call New Jerseyizing them. So basically what we're trying to do is to match what's out there with issues that we find within the state, and then make the suggestions to the teachers, like, if you are from this specific area, here is a group of lessons that we've modified to bring it home to the students and make it understandable.
It's so important that we connect students to their space, and this is what we call space-based teaching. And it is imperative that we take the time as educators to intimately know and understand our school community and those living there. And what we might come to understand are the strengths of the community, the weaknesses of the community, the threats and the opportunities. And by knowing that, that's going to ensure that our curricular decisions will connect with our school population. Many times, young teachers, they're going to be looking at that first job, coming in and saying, hey, this is great. But they just don't know well enough right now that they should be moving out into the community and learning a little bit about them. I remember starting my position, my former district, where I said, if I'm teaching earth and space science, I need to know where I'm teaching. So I made it a point of visiting the environmental commission, visiting the town board, and learning a little bit about grabbing whatever literature I can, just to get a sense for who this population is. What can I do? What can I bring to them? And what can I draw out of them by my teaching?
It's important also for educational institutions to teach about the social issues surrounding climate change. What are the effects on different communities? Who are the different stakeholders? What motivates different stakeholders to play various roles within this entire issue? And I think it's it's important for educational institutions to teach the civic aspect of this alongside the climate issues per se. So what I mean by that is educational institutions have a chance to teach students how democracy works in this regard. So, whether you live in the US or India or another democracy, it's important to know that you can use your voice no matter what age you are, even if you're not old enough to vote, to impact legislators and other elected officials to make new changes.
And so kids, as they move through the day, they see the connection between what they're studying in math and science and history and English. And that is the ultimate goal of educating for sustainability, to help kids unleash their potential and to help us all get to the future we want.
Next, our experts will talk about some of the key pedagogical frameworks and tools that they lean on when designing lesson plans and learning experiences that integrate ESD in ways that promote learner empowerment and agency.
I personally prefer UBD, understanding by design. And for those who are not familiar with UBD, the basic premise is have an idea of what you want the students to accomplish or produce, and then reverse engineer the learning experience to facilitate that. I always feel that the students have it right in the sense they're always asking, why do I need to know this, right? Why should I care? And I think that should be the first question you always answer for the students. Because if you as the teacher are unable to articulate the importance of what the students are doing, why they need to be doing what they're doing, it really, in essence, why waste your time?
To make sure that teachers aren't starting with the national standards upon which to then develop their learning activities, but rather be thinking about kind of overarching big ideas.
Transformational learning theory is really showing me a path where you need a moment where it all comes together. So just classes where you're learning fragments of things that in every student's head, they have to come together in a coherent way in order for it to be transformational. So we need to build into the school experience, the learning experience, those transformational coherence events.
I also think this is tricky to put in curriculum, but youth voice and youth choice, where the youth gets to say, I want to explore this UN SDG, or this is a passion of mine because, is always really, really important.
Getting students to be really interested in something and then individualize that interest. If you're interested in, for example, renewable energy like I am, I should have the freedom to search something up during class. I think more individualized interest would be really helpful because then people can potentially find their own passions.
That just increases student investment, and they get to learn about sustainability from the lens that they're already connected to and passionate about. So really seeing climate change in our curriculum in all subject areas, and then empowering youth to really connect to this in a personal way. And I think the UN SDGs is a fantastic way to do that, because you can say, I really care about gender equality, and you can see how they're all interconnected, and what you're passionate about as a student is connected to sustainability and the climate crisis.
We have service learning, we have project-based learning, we have place-based learning, authentic learning. In education, there are many, many pedagogical practices that teachers have professional development on, that school systems are providing capacity for, and we need to use all of those to deliver on this way of thinking, as well as help kids know what can they do in their home community.
I tend to lean towards our project-based learning. I tend to lean towards case-based learning, problem-based learning. All of these are different types and ways that we can get students involved and coming up with solutions that are not just one solution, but as instead can be a myriad of solutions. Along the other lines, if a classic approach needs to be taken, there's what we call the 5E model, which is very classic, where we're starting off with students with engagement and then move them through a series of steps where they're unpacking their learning, that they're adding to it, and it's becoming more comprehensive.
Look at a more democratic process in the classroom. The idea of voting, the idea of getting children to plan, the idea of a conversation built around and not but. These are very tiny, strategies, but they work wonders.
I survey the kids frequently and I ask for their feedback, and then I let them know, like, look, you see me as a teacher, you see me as an authority figure, but I'm a professional and I'm learning, right? I'm learning how to be a teacher.
Co-creation is foundational. What can we do together? What do you think we have to do for this? What do we need? What do you need from me? It's this language that engages and encourages children to take the lead.
And so I oftentimes ask the kids, right, this week we did X, Y, and Z. What did you learn? Right? What questions do you have for me? What questions or what topics didn't seem to stick? Do you have any overarching questions about content that I could address next time? Right? Do you have any advice or suggestions on what to do to make your learning a little easier? And what I find is, for the most part, the students really do. They give great advice. And I feel like answering their feedback gives the students agency.
Even in the courses that I have been part of for 4 years in my high school, I have realized that so many of them just make these problems seem so big because they are, but don't focus so much on what we can do about it.
And I also think that providing solutions that in any level, any grade, any age could implement would be amazing.
Once they realize how their work is connected with the bigger picture, like in the case of the plastics, where we found plastics in detergents and in fibers from clothes, and how this was getting into the food chain and how it was affecting the food that comes to their table. This created a sort of an awareness that they never thought about.
Our experts in this module have shared many great tips to help us start thinking about how we can integrate ESD into our lesson planning, pedagogy, and mindset. But of course, there will always be challenges. Let's hear from some of our experts on what they see to be some of the common challenges in integrating ESD and how we can overcome them.
I think the biggest challenge often is the adult who is unwilling to listen and unwilling to slow down. We are so tuned to action and direction and driving that when an adult takes over the process, then you're less likely to have a child say, I have agency, right? Because then you are you're waiting to be told what to do next. I've often found that it's not even a fact, it's a perception of time or the lack of it. There's always this I've heard, oh, where's the time? We have so much to do. The time, and then we don't realize that when you work with children, you actually gain the gift of time, because no longer are you pushing or pulling children on the learning program. They're walking with you, so you travel distance much faster together.
A lot of the elementary teachers and a lot of the non-science teachers have difficulty in relating it to their subjects because they haven't been trained in doing so. And the science teachers also, even though they are trained in the sciences, often find that they have questions about how they should be teaching this.
People get a little bit nervous about including science when they're a math teacher or a social studies teacher, but they shouldn't be, because we experience science every day. And climate change is something that affects every single one of us. And so we already have background personal experience ourselves that we can bring into the classroom.
Structural things like the daily schedule. The day is divided by subject matter, and you've got your teacher who's responsible for math and your teacher who's throughout their whole professional career has been a science teacher. But it's actually not too tricky. It's the psychological hurdle, I think, more than anything.
It's important for us to prioritize. And I honestly might stack a specific class on race and teaching people not to be racist above a class on climate education. That I do think in an ideal world we have both.
It's so important that we remain positive for the youth and for the next generation, because I think there are so many incredible ideas out there that they might have that we might not get to be tapped into if we stay in this doom and gloom mindset. You might not know that one student in your class might have the next incredible idea to help us improve our world and improve our environments. But if you don't tap into that, if you don't make it student-centered, if you kind of don't empower them and tell them about the positive things that are going on globally, then they might be like, well, I guess it's easier to just continue along and not take action. Taking action's hard, but there's so many great ideas out there, so we should just make sure that we're supporting students in their incredible ideas.
It's a little humbling when you have a student that is, of course, more knowledgeable than you, and a student that's, probably smarter than you. And it's very important to accept that, because that's really the goal. We're here to mold the next generation of scientists and leaders. And we need them to be better than us, and we need them to be stronger than us, and we need them to be smarter than us. Right. And so in a way, that's that level of humility, I think, is essential to doing our jobs correctly.
In this second module, we hope you came away with some helpful tips for getting started or building upon the work you're already doing, integrating ESD into your teaching and lesson planning process.
To sum up as part of our action planning framework, let's review some key steps for lesson planning to integrate ESD. First, think about what is the big idea or enduring understanding you want your learners to come away with. Then look for opportunities in your existing curriculum for weaving in these big ideas. For example, let's say you want to explore the role healthy soil plays in capturing carbon from the atmosphere, and teach learners about how they can start composting to play a role in improving soil health. Where in the curriculum might that fit in? Composting is a great example that can help teach, say, grade 2 science standards about how plants and animals depend on each other, with worms eating our food waste compost, in turn helping the decomposition process and contributing to soil health. Or to help teach kindergarten math standards about sorting by having children identify what kinds of waste materials are compostable, recyclable, or should go in the trash. Next, what interactive pedagogical approaches can you use to facilitate learner empowerment and agency, and how will you hook their attention from the very beginning? We'll talk through more examples of specific lesson ideas in our next module. Next, how can you weave in social-emotional learning? Ideas include using teamwork to build relationship skills like active listening and empathy, helping learners identify solutions to sustainability challenges as a way to help them manage what might be difficult emotions like eco-anxiety, and thinking of how you can frame environmental solutions as ways of showing empathy to others. In the resources section for this module, we've included a lesson planning template that walks you through these questions and thinking about how to build an engaging lesson plan. Thank you for participating in this module. In our next module, Module 3, we'll get into more specific ideas and examples of the kind of lessons and projects you can plan to integrate ESD across subjects. Thank you for participating.